recognize that. But these price increases started long before Putin crossed into Ukraine. This is not something where you can just blame big oil and go after price gouging. This is not something where you can attack others when it is failed policies that this administration has put in place. It really comes down to basic supply and demand. And we know that supply matters and domestic supply matters. If we're not learning anything from Ukraine and Russia and what we're seeing in Eastern Europe, domestic supply matters. So the Biden administration needs to reverse its anti-supply actions. It needs to take its bad ideas off the table. It needs to restart our development programs. It needs to start approving crucial projects that deliver greater supply. It's a pretty simple choice here. We can pick Alaska over Iran. We can pick Wyoming over Venezuela. So it's pretty easy here. My colleagues are going to have a great deal more to say about this, so I will turn to the senator from Wyoming, the ranking member of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, who's been leading on these issues for a long time. Senator Brasso.
Thanks, Lisa. So today, for the 9th day in a row, energy prices in America, the price at the pump has hit an all-time high, $4.56 a gallon. There's the comparison today than the day when Joe Biden took office, when it was $2.38 a gallon. There's not a single state in the country where gas is under $4 a gallon today. And in Wyoming, where people drive the most miles per capita than any other state in the country, people are feeling it particularly hard. And Joe Biden seems to be willing and committed to keeping the cost of energy high for the American people for the foreseeable future. Otherwise, why does he continue to choke and strangle energy production in America? Just last week, he canceled 3 major lease sales for exploration for oil and gas in the United States. Just canceled them. You know, he can't have it both ways. One day last week, he had said it was Putin's price hike, and the very next day, he canceled these lease sales. The American people see through this. They understand this. Joe Biden has lost all credibility in terms of his ability to deal with inflation, the cost of energy. And the American people have lost all confidence in this president to relieve the pain at the pump. When people drive by a gas station, a convenience store, and they see the price right up there on the sign, and you see prices like that, people wince, because they know for sure that that means they're going to have less money left over for food, for clothing, or to do things with their kids. And what's the president decided to do? Well, he's come up with a gimmick to release 1 million barrels a day of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It's done nothing to relieve the pain at the pump. But it has made us more vulnerable. I mean, that energy is there in case of a true emergency. And it may not be there with the way he's kind of continuing to release 1 million barrels a day all the way up until Election Day. The American people know we have the energy in the ground, and Joe Biden will not let us get it out. And why won't he let it get out? Well, because he is so beholden to the climate extremists. That's the altar at which he worships. So it is no surprise that the American people think we are going to pay high prices for a long, long time to come. And it's the reason that 3 out of 4 Americans today say our country is headed in the wrong direction.
Someone showed me a Facebook post yesterday, and the poster commented, my neighbor is so excited. He just filled up his gas tank for $28. The bad news is it was his lawnmower. And I think that kind of reflects the sentiments in America today. Not just gasoline prices, but inflation. And it is a serious problem for lower middle income and poor Americans. For upper middle income and higher Americans, this inflation led by gasoline prices may cause them to have to choose between Amazon Prime and Netflix. But for our less fortunate Americans, it's a choice between filling up their car or paying their rent or buying the food. It's no mystery why we're having this inflation in gasoline. When your demand remains constant or it increases and your supply shrinks, you're going to see price increases every single time. Why is supply shrinking? Well, I think the main reason, there are other reasons, but I think the main reason has to do with President Biden's energy policy. We know now, after 14 months, that President Biden's energy policy is wind, solar, and wishful thinking. The American economy is the most powerful economy in all of human history. It can't run without energy. 80% of our energy comes from fossil fuels. Someday that will be lower, but that day is not here. And gasoline markets and oil markets are like every other market. They don't just, the price does not just reflect the current situation. Markets are forward-looking. The price of gasoline today and the price of oil and natural gas also reflects what people who produce the product and who buy the product think about the future. And there's no question that they look ahead under the Biden administration and see that they expect the Biden administration to continue to do everything it can to bankrupt the oil and gas industry. And I know the Biden administration will respond by saying, oh, Kennedy, we're producing more oil today and natural gas in America than we ever have. But once again, these markets are not just today, looking at today, they are they're forward looking. And that's just basic economics 101. I'll give you one example quickly. The president says, I'm not against oil and gas. All you have to do is look at his proposed new rules for the National Environmental Policy Act, the proposed rules for NEPA. Take a good look at a pipeline, because you won't see another one in America if these rules pass. You can't produce, certainly, natural gas without pipelines. So, thank you for being here.
Iowa is a very rural state, and many of the folks that live in our small town communities do have to commute. They have to commute to get to their jobs. And the cost of fuel today is really putting a strain on those individuals that are just trying to get out there and do their jobs. We have seen this all across the United States, but in Iowa in particular, we hit an all-time high this past week, the highest fuel has ever been in history in the state of Iowa, and our diesel fuel is even worse. So when you look at $4.50 or so for gasoline, we have diesel now that's over $5 a gallon. And this is the spring planting season in Iowa. And our equipment runs on diesel. And so when you look at the cost of the inputs that our farmers have, a lot of that falls on the fertilizer shortage. A heck of a lot of it falls on the fuel prices, and then it is driving up every part of our economy. We rely on transportation to get goods from point A to point B, and the fuel costs are wrapped up in those goods. with inflation, the fuel costs, all of our families are paying $5,200 more this year for the same goods and services that they paid for last year. It's really hard on folks across Iowa. This crisis, it's self-inflicted. You've heard my colleagues talk about what we can do as a United States and what the administration should be doing. First and foremost, let's unleash American energy. We have the capabilities, we have the skills, and we have the resources right here in the United States to be energy independent. We shouldn't be subjected to these prices. Iowans should not be subjected to these prices. So I am encouraging the administration to get out there, rethink their dependence upon this deranged climate policy, really do the right thing for Americans, put Americans to work. Let's use our own natural resources here. So this hurt, it's going to keep going, and unless President Biden decides to do something different, and I pray that he does, because it is destroying our rural communities.
Well, with the highest number of illegal border crossers in history last month, we have a 40-year high in inflation. We have families that can't get access to baby formula. And for the 9th consecutive day in a row, we hit the highest gasoline prices in the history of our country. To put some context in this, I feel somewhat guilty talking to some of the other states on this, because when we were gathering here in this same room a month ago, this is a comparison to the pictures that I showed you a month ago. This is in El Reno, Oklahoma. You can get gas a month ago for $3.95. As of this week, it's $4.34. And that's cheap for a lot of other areas of the country and what they're experiencing. Listen, this frustration that we have is this White House does this all the time right now, constantly on energy production. That their focus is, we want more energy, and then when they ask for permits, if they ask for leases, if they ask for permission to do seismic tests offshore, they say no, no, no. So publicly, they're saying one thing, and then privately, they're saying to the producer something very different. What does that really look like in real life? Well, the administration, as they shut off seismic studies in the Gulf of Mexico, they can say, well, the leases are out there, but you actually can't go drill because you can't do the seismic work. So instead, the president will go to Iowa and will say, we're going to increase ethanol production. And then the very same week, the president steps up and says, we're going to release 1 million barrels of oil a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Well, Mr. President, you announced that March the 31st. And March the 31st, when you made the announcement, we're going to release 1 million barrels of oil a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, average price was $4.22. Now, we're hitting record highs. Well above that. Listen, this constant rolling piece that we see is the constant increase of prices based on the administration saying they don't want more supply, but they actually want prices to go down. That's not how it works. This week, in fact, just yesterday, we had a hearing with some of the folks from Canada and some of the energy producers from Canada and some of the Canadian government officials. And they were astounded that just months ago, President Biden announced that we need to get more oil into the United States, and so he went to Russia and to OPEC and encouraged them to produce more oil. When the Canadians were saying, we have ready oil available right next door, but for whatever reason, the administration doesn't want Canadian oil and is discouraging the production of American oil, all the while saying, I wish the prices would go down. At the same time, we've got investors doing this ESG, like BlackRock and others, that are actually trying to cut off access to capital for oil and gas companies that need access to capital to actually do the drilling and the operation. They're making the capital more expensive because of the ESG standard that they put out there. Listen, Americans feel this. This is what real life looks like every single day for Oklahomans when they're trying to figure out how I'm going to buy groceries and all the different effects that they're actually feeling. When Oklahomans ask me, why are prices up so high? I can point to this every time. Because the price of diesel is up, that means every single product that we buy that's transported on a diesel truck all just went up in price. The price of all shipping went up. The price of all ag products just went up because every single tractor fuel price went up, skyrocketed. So we're feeling the effects on every single area of the economy because President Biden is unwilling to deal with the base of our economy, that's energy prices.
So the average price of a gallon of gasoline across country now, $4.56 a gallon. It just keeps going up. How much higher is it going to go? There isn't a single state in the country now where gasoline is less than $4 a gallon. And if you want to buy diesel, add another dollar on top for a gallon of diesel. So North Dakota, my state, is a big energy producing state. But we're also a big ag state. Now think about what those prices mean for our farmers who are just now getting out in the field. Not only the fuel, the gasoline, the diesel that they need to run their tractors or other equipment, but fertilizer. Look at what that's done, because fertilizer is very energy intensive, right? Okay, so not only is their fuel much higher, now their fertilizer, if they can even get it, that's much higher too. That puts a huge burden on the people that produce our food supply every single day. And that's not just a burden on our farmers and ranchers. What does that translate into? Well, our farmers and ranchers produce the highest quality, lowest cost food supply in the world that every single American benefits from every single day. But when they have those increased energy costs caused by the Biden administration's energy policies, that affects every single American every single day because it's in the food supply, right? So when you look at inflation, a huge component of inflation across the board in every product is that energy cost. And it's because the Biden administration has put the handcuffs on our energy producers, whether it's restricting things like Keystone XL pipeline or restricting our ability to build gas gathering systems so we don't have to flare natural gas, right? Instead, we can get it to market, whether it's putting a moratorium on federal lands, onshore and offshore. And oh, by the way, then he says, well, we're going to reverse that, but he only opens up 20%, but he raises the royalty rate, and then he stops actual leases. He just stopped a lease in Alaska. He just stopped leasing in the Gulf of Mexico. So that moratorium continues, but then the Biden administration says, well, no, just produce the leases you have. Well, the problem there is they're holding up the permits and the ability to produce those leases because of the blizzard of regulations and in the courts. So those leases then can't be produced either. So it's the regulatory burden they put out there as well. And then it not only affects us in terms of our economy, it's a national security issue. Our inability to permit LNG facilities means we can't get natural gas to our allies in Europe, in Western Europe. And so that makes them dependent on Russia at the very time that we're working to fight against, to support Ukraine in their fight against Russian aggression. So it's not only an economic imperative that affects every American every day, it's a national security imperative. We need a change in this energy policy. We need a change in this energy policy right now for all those reasons and more. And that's why it's incumbent on all of us and people across this country to stand up and say, all right, Biden administration, enough of this. Enough of this. Quit telling us that you're trying to help us with this inflation problem when you continue to restrict our ability to produce energy in this country.
Well, thank you all for being here, and I think that you can hear the frustrations in everybody's voices, and also I think we've done an excellent job of framing the issue, and we don't have to do it too much because it gets framed to us every weekend. I come from West Virginia. We drive everywhere. We drive to school. We drive to work. We drive to the grocery store. We drive to church. We drive to see our families. We drive to see our friends. I mean, we are rural America where cars are the only way to get to the places that you need to be. And so I think what people want to hear is, I get it, that you understand that gas has gone up in West Virginia today. I think it was $4.34. It's now nationally $4.56 up. They want to see somebody take responsibility, and the president is the one who said when he was first elected, I'll take responsibility instead of blaming others. And honestly, all he's done in this instance, something that hits everybody every day in their pocketbook, is blame everybody else. He blames Vladimir Putin. He blames COVID. He blames even American businesses. And if you just even look and try to deflect his reasoning on who he blames, you can see that the prices were escalating well before Vladimir Putin ever invaded Ukraine. They've been escalating for a year before we even heard him talk about it with any kind of meaningful discussion. So, we have these high gas prices. We know that the solutions are there, and we've heard folks talk about it. I know Lisa on the Energy Committee has worked hard on unleashing the American entrepreneurship and the American energy. Certainly, I come from an energy state as well that can be a contributor to help bring America back to that energy security and those and the security of families knowing what their obligations are going to be when they fill up their car. So I was actually in my driveway, and I was going to take a walk, and this guy in a truck is driving by, stops. This is a true story. His name's Craig, and he tells me that he has to fill his truck up every day, and it costs him $140 to fill his truck up every single day. It's diesel. I said, well, what was it before? What was it before all these prices went up? $60. So it's basically almost 2.5 times now for him to fill up. And it's gone up probably even more since we had the conversation over the last weekend. So it's time for the president to take responsibility that's actually going to result in pulling together and lowering these gas prices. So I would say we have heard from West Virginians. I know you all are hearing from people on your websites. I just brought a few with me. I went past a gas station today in Huntington. Gas is now $4.25, so this is obviously a little probably dated to last week. A gallon, food is going up, utilities are going up. I'm a senior, and I'm barely making it. Senior citizen, Huntington, West Virginia. Quote, this is a father and a husband in Wellsburg, which is the very tippy top of our state. I fear before summer I will literally be choosing which to pay. Fuel for my vehicle, or food for the table for myself, my wife, and my 2 small children. And then lastly, a woman in Fayetteville, which is right near our new national park, I would encourage you to visit, says with the increase in gas and diesel, everything else increases. It doesn't seem that anyone in Washington cares. So I would ask the president to take responsibility and make sure that our friend in Fayetteville, West Virginia, knows that we care and work on this very, very deep and expensive gas crisis that we're seeing in front of our American public. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Harry Truman famously had on his desk a plaque that said, "The buck stops here." Joe Biden seems to have replaced that plaque with instead the phrase, "The buck stops with Putin." Because nothing is Joe Biden's fault. Well, I'll tell you what, the little stickers on gas pumps all across the country illustrate the American people know exactly whose fault this is. This was deliberate. This isn't an accident. This isn't an unintended side effect. This is exactly what Joe Biden promised he would do, and it's what he's done. If you look at when Biden was sworn in, gas nationally was $2.09 a gallon. On that first day, what does Biden do? He cancels the Keystone Pipeline. Boom, day one. What does he do after that? January 27th, a week later. He halts all new oil and gas leases on federal land, both onshore and offshore. Federal land, onshore and offshore, comprises roughly 25% of U.S. oil and gas production. Next, February 19th, he rejoins the Paris Climate Agreement. Notice what's happening to the price. Next, May 7th, 2021, Biden takes 30% of land off limits to oil and gas. Price keeps going up. June 1st, he halts drilling in ANWR, the incredibly petroleum-rich section of Alaska with vast reserves, very small portion of Alaska, he shuts it down. Price keeps going up. June 30th. Congress reverses the Trump natural gas regulations. October 7th, Biden reverses the Trump NEPA regulations. October 29th, Interior begins the, quote, social cost of carbon designed, again, to drive gas prices up. November 15th, a moratorium on oil drilling in the Chaco Canyon. And then February 24th, Russia invades Ukraine. By the way, Biden is trying to blame Putin for the increase. And listen, Putin bears some responsibility for that increase, but he doesn't bear responsibility for all of this. All of this happened before Putin invaded Ukraine. March 1st, Biden releases oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. March 21st, the SEC proposes an anti-oil rule. Let's shut off equity. By the way, you combine that with the banking regulators that Biden put forth, who are trying to shut off debt. So if you have no equity for drilling oil and gas, and you have no debt for drilling oil and gas, you know what that means? You have no money for drilling oil and gas. And what happens is the price keeps going up and up and up. And then May 12th, Biden cancels the remaining lease sales. This is decision after decision after decision designed to cause the price to go from $2.09 to $4.48 a gallon on average. Just yesterday, I led a letter with 19 of my Senate colleagues to Biden's Secretary of Commerce, asking her to stop slow-walking permits for oil and gas exploration in the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico has massive reserves. At its peak, produced roughly 2 million barrels a day. And yet the Biden administration is slow-walking permits at every stage. This is deliberate. It's not an accident. It's the radical Green New Deal politics, because Joe Biden believes if gas is $5 a gallon or $6 a gallon or $10 a gallon, that if he imposes enough pain on working men and women, if he has enough moms that have to spend $100 to fill their minivan, if he has enough guys that are spending $150 to fill their truck, that eventually everyone will have this epiphany and get rid of that truck or get rid of that minivan, and everyone will go buy an electric car. And he's willing to make the American people suffer because of his political agenda. This is wrong. It's cynical. It's abusive. It's cruel. It's hurting the most vulnerable in our country. And it's all deliberate.
Thank you. As I go around Arkansas, the number one thing that I hear is inflation. This is why it's not magic. This is why President Biden in the latest polling is at 38%. If you poll him on how he's handling inflation, it's much, much, much lower than that. It's not just about gasoline. Certainly if you take it $20, $30, we're all two-wage earner families or individuals, but you take $20, $30 out of each one's pocket each week at least, you wind up with people just not having any disposable income left. So it's a huge problem in that regard, but it's not just gasoline. People have the ability to somewhat back off on that. In Arkansas, we do a tremendous amount of driving, like Shelley was talking about in West Virginia. So maybe you don't drive quite as much. Diesel is $2 a gallon more expensive than it was a year ago. There's no way to get out from underneath that. Every product, my suit, this dice, everything in this room was either trucked in or railed in or whatever. And so as a result, those prices aren't going to go down. They're feeding the fuel. And so again, it's not just the cost of gasoline in your tank. It's your food, which depends on fertilizer, depending on natural gas. It is your electricity, which is probably $50 or $60 more higher this month than it was a year ago. The list goes on and on. I'm particularly worried about the Northeast with heating oil. There'll be people that are colder this winter simply because we're going to have a significant increase. Nobody's talking about this, but come wintertime, we'll have a significant increase compared to what we have now. So these are serious things that we need to consider. Rarely do you have a problem that the answer is staring you in the face, and that's really what we've been talking about. The reality is a good part of that. We really do need to consider making it much easier to lease, to go forward with oil exploration, and then again allow the pipelines that deliver that oil in a very environmentally sensitive way to be built and used. What we don't need is talking to Venezuela, talking to Iran, where certainly sending those dollars to those countries from the wealth of the United States makes no sense at all. But also, if you really are concerned about the environment, there's no way that the Venezuelans, that the Iranians are going to produce it in the environmentally sensitive way that we do in the United States.
And I, too, thank you for being here. And I wish that I could say that canceling these latest oil leases came as a surprise, but it is no surprise at all. The day Joe Biden put his hand on the Bible and he was sworn in as President of the United States, he began this to destroy American energy. And it's just par for the course that he continues this war on American energy. It's also par for the course for them to blame everybody except the White House and the president. They blame Democrats, they blame Republicans, they blame Putin, they blame oil companies. But Americans, that has been said here before at this podium, they know better. You know, as Senator Kennedy said, this is just the basic fundamentals of economics. A ninth grader can figure this out. And so many of us we've introduced legislation with real solutions that to address this. It's fallen on deaf ears. So it is purposely done, and the Biden administration and the Democrats need to take this crisis seriously and stop finding every excuse in the book to shrink energy production. And until this happens, every family and business in Mississippi and around this country will continue to pay the price of Biden's failed energy policies.
Thank you. We've had 45 minutes of this, and I think you've gotten a sense of the impacts across the country on everyday American families, whether they are from Alaska or Arkansas or places in between. So maybe just two really quick questions, please. Go ahead.
Let's say President Biden did absolutely everything that you're calling for. Exactly how long? Weeks, months? Exactly how long would it take for prices to go down at gas stations and Americans to notice the difference?
Well, I have suggested, and I think Senator Cruz did as well, that when the signal is sent that this administration recognizes that domestic production, our own energy, is an asset and not a liability, that then sends a signal to the markets that can be real, that can be immediate, and can be transformative. That sends a signal to investors that have been holding back. That sends a signal to those who have said, and I don't think that it's going to be cost economic to go forward with this particular lease, because every indication that we're getting from this administration is as soon as I take step one, they're going to shut me down. So that can be immediate. That signal can make a difference. And all it would take is President Biden to stand in front of a microphone and say, given what is happening in this country, the unprecedented place that we are at today, the impact on everyday Americans, I've got an obligation to say Americans are going to come first and American energy production is going to come first. He could do that today. Go ahead.
For Senator Cruz,
Go ahead.
What about the dynamic we hear from independent market analysts that the biggest, most primary factor in holding back domestic production is this investor sentiment saying, you know, things are pretty good. It's pretty good to be in the oil business in Texas right now in terms of profits coming in with these high prices. and they don't want to hear about capital expenditures to ramp up production.
That's simply not accurate. I talk to oil and gas producers in the state of Texas every week, sometimes every day. Today, I was visiting with the CEO of a major pipeline construction company based in Texas. They said in the last year and a half, their revenue from pipeline construction has dropped 2/3. Dropped from $900 million to $300 million. And the reason is simple. They said you can't get a damn permit. You can't build a pipeline. And so, and by the way, they also build solar panels. They said they can't get those built either. The amazing thing is this administration, their policies are hammering the energy industry. I was out in Midland, Odessa, the Permian Basin, incredibly rich petroleum reserves, able to power America's needs. The folks there, they want to drill, they can't get capital. Because this administration has succeeded in drying up capital, where the banks, the big banks in Wall Street, this administration has pressured them, and they're out of the business of loaning for new production. You can't drill if you don't have the capital to drill. Just yesterday, I and other members of the Foreign Relations Committee had coffee with the Prime Minister of Greece. We talked about the war in Ukraine. I asked, what can we do to stop Putin? What would be effective? He said, America needs to produce more oil and gas, and we need to buy more oil and gas from you guys. It ain't complicated. But this is deliberate. And by the way, Biden told you he would do this on the campaign trail. He promised, if I'm elected, I will shut down drilling. I'll end it. And so everyone in the corporate press that says, well, gosh, this is other factors. You know, my favorite talking point from the White House that they say from the podium is, this is just greedy oil companies. You know what? Fine. Oil companies are greedy. You know what? They were greedy when it was $2.09 too. Under that theory, a year and a half ago, oil companies didn't want to make money, and suddenly they do. It's absurd. This is what Biden promised he would do, and it may be the only campaign promise he made that he's actually delivered on. And there's a cynicism. Number one, they think the American people are stupid, that they don't understand this is deliberate. But number two, they're willing to say they don't like the choices you make. Some of you may drive a pickup truck. Some of you may drive a Suburban. And this White House says, we don't like your choices, so we're going to make it hard for you to pay your bills. We're going to make it hard for you to feed your family. We're going to make it hard for you to pay your rent, because if it's so hard, you'll suddenly wake up and say, I need to buy me a $100,000 electric car with a battery made in China. And you know what? That's not Joe Biden's decision to make. The American people ought to make a decision about their own families, and this is cruel and it's deliberate.
Thank you all.